Hello, fantasy enjoyers. The streak continues of content made around this season of HLTV Fantasy League. I'm a bit under the weather right now, so I do apologize if I'm coughing and spluttering and sound like garbage. But the show must go on. We did a pretty solid tournament there at top 18%. It was floating around the top 10% for a while, and unfortunately, on the last day, I got collective minus nearly 20 points between Story and Hooksy. Story ran into a VP that just got better and better as the tournament went on, and they were just next on the chopping block. It was a 2-0. First map, I think Story got around 0.5 rating. It was a shocker for Saw. They lost like 16-3. And they weren't able to stabilize for that second map either. G2 were just a shambles, mate. Like, honestly, at this point, I don't know what to think of this team. They barely clawed and scratched their way into the playoffs. Nico is the most inconsistent player in Counter-Strike right now. Started 9-22 in their first map, and then it goes into multiple OTs, and he ends up on the top of the leaderboard in terms of the rating, and it's like, what's going on? You see the Jekyll and Hyde of Nico himself in that tournament, so I have no idea what to expect in the playoffs. I have to see who they're going to be fighting off against first, really, to make any kind of guess on that one. What we do know, though, is Vitality and FaZe did not disappoint. They both did great. Vitality in particular were just balling, and especially because ZywOo showing us that he might have been a bit off in the playoffs. Some people are speculating it's because of his illness. Some people are speculating because he just wasn't feeling it. Whatever the reason is, he didn't have a great playoffs, but he came back and he delivered and showed us why he is the best player in the world. 300 plus points if he went for ZywOo. Pretty much insane. He got more points single-handed than most people did in their entire fantasy league team. He was the best player by far, and a huge reason why Vitality cruised through and got all their W's. Brain continues to be just a consistent points printer. He's in FaZe, they're winning, and he's normally a pretty consistent part of that. He's never going to be like the top fragger. He might have a couple of days where he's on the bottom, but as long as they're winning, he's going to be getting you points for the most part. Especially if you slap the headshot machine on him, nearly 63%. The stats don't lie. The guy is a headshotting monster. So, with that being said, let's have a look where that puts us overall in the celebrity leaderboard. We were in 5th position. We slipped out, of course, down to 8th or 9th. Now we're working our way back up again. We're 1 point behind Blair, who's in 5th. And we're only 4 points behind Nart, who is in 4th position, 13 behind Striker in the top 3, which is pretty close as well. So if I can have a really strong performance here, then maybe I can start to crowbar my way into the top 3, which would be amazing. But I set myself the goal of top 5 coming into this season, so we're right on the brink of that. We've extended our lead as well as like the middle of the pack, so we're doing pretty well for ourselves. You can see really it's been about consistency. I've never really fully popped off this season. Last season I had a couple of top 2, top 3%. This season the best I've done I think is top 10. Yeah, I got top 10 once, top 11, top 15, but it's been more the consistency over the duration of this last sort of 6 or 7 tournaments that's got me sort of up the leaderboard. I started horribly, 58, 16, 80, 45, 47. But we're really starting to hit like a nice patch. The 41% is the outlier. We had 18, 11, 15, 28, 20. Anything under 30, and I'm happy with it, really. Anything under 20, I'm very happy. So if I can hit like another top 20, maybe even breaching into the top 10s, it'll see me catapult up or at least secure my spot in the top 5. So consistency really is king when it comes to the fantasy league. But we've seen P2, by the way, he's landed multiple like top 1s. It's absolutely insane. Top 2, top 7, top 7. This guy's an animal. he just doesn't really miss very often at all. Anyway, let's have a look at these groups because it's going to educate us on who we're going to end up picking and who we think is going to go far. So in Group C, in the top half of the bracket, you got Mouse, Bad News Kangaroos, Ents, Gamer Legion. And in the bottom, it's Furia, Liquid, Fours, and Monty. In Group D, the top is going to be Complexity, Pera, NIP, and Heroic. And on the bottom is Big, Boss, FlyQuest, and Na'Vi. I think both groups are relatively even in terms of the teams that are taking part. You could argue that Group C is a little bit more stacked, but I think Group D, has many solid teams as well, and some very close ones that are kind of difficult to call. So my predictions for Group C is I think Mouse will make it through to the upper finals, and I think they're most likely going to face off against Liquid. But this is a very tough game to call because Furia and Liquid, not just in the world rankings, are close, but obviously the change that people have been waiting forever to see, which is Art out, has happened, and now Kai has came in. Now, I'm not sure in terms of roles, in terms of the sort of positions on the server, how this is going to work out. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out for ourselves. Is it too early for this Furia team to fully click together and have a really strong performance here? I'm not sure. But on the other side, Liquid have so many heavy hitters that have been playing together now for a while, and they're getting better as time goes on, where I would slightly favour them to get the W here. It's going to be close, though, and Yakindar is the big sort of outlier when it comes to Liquid. He's had a lot of very lackluster performances, and a lot of people have been calling for him to get replaced. But we'll have to wait and find out what happens in that regard. I think the winner of this, though, will progress through. Force have Smuya coming in. I think he's a stand-in or on a trial or something like that. Obviously, Nickelback has been around the block for a very long time, and Shalfie's a very good player. Monty have had their own changes, though. Obviously, Sumdai Young came out fairly recently. Gizmi was put back in. So they're both teams in transition, but I think that Furia or Liquid beat whoever wins out of that game, and I expect Mouse to just go the distance. Ensign Gamer Legion is another tough one. Ents have had their own problems. You know, I was mentioning about Yakindar having a bit of fall from grace. D has had probably the biggest fall from grace, as far as I'm concerned, as a guy that has been watching him since his first games at pro level in LAN, back at DreamHack Leipzig, where he's playing for Sprout. And I've watched this guy's trajectory of his career just go up and up and up and up, and his stock, you know, rise. These last few months have been really difficult to watch for Diha, and I've backed him multiple times in my fantasy league and been let down a lot. 0.96 rating. Ever since his contract extension that he signed, he's just been plummeting. Kyler's been really good. He was their best player at the major, I would say, alongside Hades. They still have a lot of potential on this team. Hopefully, they've managed to course correct and get on the same page and figure out what's going wrong. But Gamer Legion are a very underrated team. You know, Ash, as the coach, Aura's doing a great job for this squad. I think they're an underrated team. There's some real talent, some real heavy hitters on this squad. So I could see Gamer Legion beating Ents. The issue is, though, I don't see either of those teams beating Mouse. And I think Mouse make it through against Furia, Liquid, Force or Monty, so I'm expecting Mouse to just take this whole thing. In Group D, a bit more difficult, I would say, on the top side of the bracket. The bottom side should be Na'Vi. They're defending major champions. They have an incredibly strong IGL in Alexi B, very tactically focused, not the heaviest of fraggers, but great supportive player. They have amazing set plays, amazing read of the game as well with Alexi, proving at the major that he is a complete monster. Wonderful is their AWP, amazing. JL, the MVP of the major, very impressive. The one player looking at is Ema, is a bit of an off component of this. Bit also up in that 1.05 bracket, was blowing hot and cold at the major, but it didn't end up mattering. I think they just are too strong for any of the team in the lower side of the bracket to really contend with. I will say, though, I reckon Big are going to do better than people expect here. I think they beat Boss. I think they'll give Na'Vi a good game. FlyQuest can't be overlooked either, though. This is actually a legit squad, ex-Greyhound. They've been getting some big performances as of late, getting some surprise and shock wins. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Na'Vi get a clear-cut, easy win. They should beat FlyQuest, and they should make it through to the upper finals. But I think that Big, this is the roster that people have been asking for ages. You know, the full German sort of outfit with Searson and JDC put in the mix again. I think you look at Searson 0.98, doesn't paint the full picture of the last 3 months, actually. I think he's a lot better than that would suggest. And this big squad, I expect them to beat Boss fairly convincingly. If they get knocked down into the lower bracket, I think that they'll have a pretty good run against almost any of these teams, because Complexity were very inconsistent at the major. We saw them take a quick 2-0, then they just collapsed. Heroic have been having their issues with Nikados. He's on a 1.01 rating. He's not landing the same mark as we saw before. And even Nertz, who is really consistent player normally, has been having some performances where he hasn't been showing up either. So it's a bit of a strange one, really, in this bracket. There's a lot more inconsistent teams, I think, in Group D as opposed to Group C. But I would expect the complexity make it through against Na'Vi and Big do well through on the lower bracket side of things. So with all of that being discussed, let's have a look at the team that I've gone for here. I'm going to stack in with Mouse again. They've done me proud almost every time I've gone with Mouse. They deliver bare minimum. Jimmy is getting a lot of points every single tournament. He is in incredible form right now. I think he's about 224k. Well worth the price as far as I'm concerned. Bad News Kangaroo should be a straightforward slapping for Mouse. I had the choice of Brolan or Exertion, or I could have gone for Torji as well. I decided to go for Exertion. He's a bit cheaper. I also think that Brolan's a little bit too inconsistent for me, and I planned on going for Searson from Big the second I saw his price. 196k, around that mark, for Searson reminds me kind of going for Story in that last group that we saw. I get the same kind of vibes for Searson. I don't expect him to be posting up sort of like 100 plus points. But for 196k, if he's landing around 40 or 50, I'll be very happy with that. And I think it's possible he could. I think it is possible. After that's my biggest gamble, I would say, and that's going for Goofy, because Ents do not breathe much confidence in me because of the issues I talked about before with Diha. I am concerned about Ents, but I have to believe that Glaive is able to course correct in the time that they've had between their last serious tournament and this one. Additionally, you can whack an eco-friendly on Goofy and he's going to be getting you some points at least. He gets a lot of SMG kills, and so I expect him to get me maybe like 10 points would be decent-ish, because the bulk of my points are going to be coming from these two guys. And then Lexi B as my final pick, just had enough money for him. Is he going to frag hard? Probably not. But his team should be winning games. And also a pretty straightforward supportive rounds player, one of the highest that you'll see in any single team. You know, it's him and Norbert really the two guys I'm normally looking at for supportive rounds. And Alexi's going to get you points. If Na'Vi win games and he's getting those supportive roles, even if he's fragging horribly, he'll be getting you little bits and pieces here and there. And considering that he's a budget player pick, I think it's completely fine. Another point to mention, though, I should highlight this. Now, I'm 95% sure that Dust 2 won't be in the map pool for Group C and D. I don't see why they change it halfway through. I'd imagine they stick with Overpass until the end of the playoffs, or at least switch it at the playoffs, but I don't think that will happen. But if they do switch to Dust 2, let me tell you right now, this is Searson's best map. He is a monster on Dust 2, and so are Big. I'm going to call right now, I reckon Big are going to go up the world rankings considerably with Dust 2 coming in. Now, they may not get a chance to play it. It may get banned against them a lot. But Tabson is an absolute monster on this map. He is one of the best Dust 2 players throughout the course of his career. And I'm talking going back into sort of like the Source days and the early CSGO days. I would see him do mad things before he switched to being an IGL on Dust 2. And even while IGLing, Dust 2 was like his playground. This is a map Big are going to be very, very scary on. Now, I don't think that Dust 2 will be in the pool, as I said before. I really doubt it. But that's another thing to put into position for the future. I'm really happy with this team, actually. I went back and forth a while. I was thinking of going for some liquid players, of getting Cadian involved, and maybe going for, like, Twists. I decided against that one because of the coin flip nature of their game against Furia, and I feel a lot better about this. I've stacked him with Mouse, feel good about that. I think I'll be good for, like, a top 25% again, maybe a top 20%. It depends really on how Mouse perform. If Mouse have a horrible tournament here, obviously, my hopes are dashed. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying this content, guys. I've tried to keep as consistent as possible with the HLTV Fantasy League videos and keep them a little bit more in-depth in terms of my thought process and keep you along the journey with me throughout this season, because it's been a lot of fun for me and hopefully you've been enjoying it as well. But I'll catch you in the next video. Hopefully, I'll be able to report some very good news of another very high finish. Catch you then.